Very good season from the Louisville Cardinals in 2025 as they finished the year 9-4. And overall, this offseason, they've done a lot to kind of keep that roster intact, being able to bring guys like Isaac Brown back after he entered the transfer portal, as well as adding some really solid players. So I do think that they have the potential to maybe meet this prediction we had from last year of 9-3. Ended up doing just slightly worse than that with four losses in ACC play. But overall, very promising outlook for Louisville in 2026.
Now, for returning starters, they only have three offensively coming back, and one of those is that starting running back in Isaac Brown. The other two are one of their tight ends and only one offensive lineman, so a lot to rebuild there. And it's the same story on defense. They only have an edge rusher coming back on the defensive line, one of their linebackers, a corner, and one of their safeties. So lots to rebuild here for Louisville, but they're doing so with a pretty good recruiting class. Their high school recruiting class is coming in at number 48, but that transfer portal class is number 18 with an overall at number 35. So very solid class. And the biggest one replacing at starting quarterback for Miller Moss is going to be former Ohio State quarterback Lincoln Keenels. Now, the big concern I would say with him is that he has not really had much starting experience outside of, some garbage time minutes against some bad teams that the Buckeyes have played in the past few years, or that Cotton Bowl game against Missouri, where the Tigers essentially blitzed eight guys at him and he could not get a single pass off. But I do think with Isaac Brown in the backfield to kind of help him, plus the fact that he is kind of a dual threat guy, that this rushing attack is going to be very nice, and that will set him up to succeed in the passing game, especially with a couple new wide receivers coming in. One of those being Trey Richardson, who was at Vanderbilt last season, and despite being 5'10", he is one of the speediest guys in college football, and I think he's going to be a great weapon to utilize. Now, they also got a couple other wide receivers that will fit more of those wide receivers they had last year, like Chris Bell, who are a little bit more taller and stronger, kind of your jump ball guys. And then they also have Case and Henry coming in as an offensive tackle. They need two offensive tackles, so having him come in is going to be great. They really went after the offensive line in the portal too to make sure they can shore up that offensive line, and that was really the biggest concern they had. And then defensively, probably the biggest acquisition they got is Cohen Entriger from Iowa, a safety who had very, very good stats last season, despite only being a three-star. I mean, it's barely a three-star, and I think he was probably one of the most sought-after safeties, considering he was in the portal a little bit later compared to like Coy Parrish, who ended up at Oregon. So overall, talent-wise, it's gonna be a B. It's a lot of three stars for the most part. Trey Richardson is pulling a lot of weight with that four-star rating, along with, some of the guys that have returning like Isaac Brown. But, that's not to say that it's necessarily going to be a bad Louisville team or not a talented team. They have a lot of guys. It's just a matter of getting them to live up to the potential, like in the example of Lincoln Keenholz, considering he hasn't played too much. But needs wise, it's going to be an A minus. They really went after that offensive line and defensive line, considering those were pretty much the two biggest weaknesses they had going into next season. Overall, it's going to be a B plus though, because you just have so much to replace, and there's not a ton of high end guys. But I still think this is going to be a very solid Cardinals team. And I do think they can have a lot of success next season, especially considering that their schedule, I don't think is too difficult.
Yeah, it does start off with kind of a difficult stretch, but it probably is the toughest three games they have, and one of them, I mean, one of them's a free win. But the game against Ole Miss in Nashville, I think is very interesting because Ole Miss, we still have no idea what's going to happen with Ole Miss. I went into it a little bit in the Missouri video, but essentially Trinidad Chambliss has been given eligibility for next year, but it was by a judge who graduated from Ole Miss. And just overall, I have no idea what's going to end up happening. If the NCAA appeals, I think there was enough corruption that he would immediately lose that eligibility he was given. So we have no idea who the starting quarterback is even going to be. So what I'll say for this, if it's Chambliss, Ole Miss wins that game. If it's not, I think it's about a 50-50. Maybe Louisville's even slight favorites. So it for me at that point, it would really come down to Lincoln Keenholz versus Deuce Knight, whichever young quarterback can, perform well in their first start, or I guess start against a Power Four opponent. So that one's really tough to end up predicting. Villanova, I think this game is on the 12th actually, not the 11th. And another thing for the Ole Miss game, it's either on Saturday or Sunday. We don't know yet. It's a flex game there. Villanova, that's a free win regardless. Who cares if it's on Friday or Saturday? They're going to win. And then SMU, also going to be at 50%. Kevin Jennings returning for SMU. This is a team that made the playoffs 2 years ago. They had a solid season last year. I think they could potentially make another run towards the playoffs this season, especially with not a terribly difficult schedule. Definitely helps Louisville that this game is at home for them. I think that maybe pushes it down to about a 50-50 shot. Again, because Keenholz is going to be, really early in his career here at Louisville, I think they have a little bit less of a chance in some of these earlier games. But as the season progresses, we'll have a very, very solid chance to win some of these tougher games.
Now, Wake Forest is going to be pretty interesting because the Demon Deacons had a really solid season last year, actually making a bowl game and surpassing a lot of people's expectations, including ours. But I don't know if they're going to have any continued success going into next year because a lot of that team is gone going into next season. Maybe some of the hype is still there from last year and can maybe manifest itself into a couple big wins early on, but I do think Louisville is the better team on paper right now. And considering this is at home, I think they should still be pretty heavily favored in this one, but we'll have to look at Wake Forest a little bit more as we get closer to the start of the season to see what really will go on for the Demon Deacons. But for right now, it's a 70% chance for Louisville. Then they're on the road against NC State. NC State, a very young team, CJ Bailey as their starting quarterback, a very athletic guy, but they've been kind of up and down. And, youth at times is not necessarily a good thing, especially against teams that are as good as Louisville has been, but it still leaves the door open for some potential upsets, especially with it being a road game for the Cardinals. It's going to be a 60% as of right now, just because Louisville's got to figure out that quarterback situation. If Lincoln Keenels ends up not really panning out, then it's going to be a tough season for them. But I do think at some point around this fourth, maybe fifth point of the season, he'll really start to get comfortable in the system. But it's still going to be a tough game against an NC State team that just has so much returning production and so much youth. And then Florida State at home. The Seminoles, I don't think they're going to be that good this season. The starting quarterback, I don't even remember who they brought in for this year, but Mike Norvell, I think, is on his way out. I'm surprised he didn't get fired at the end of last season, and I don't expect this team to be super competitive as they were at times last year, especially that opening week win against Alabama. I think Louisville is just going to be too good with the returning stars they have, particularly with Isaac Brown. I think this is the year we'll really see him establish himself as a top five running back. I think last year he had those expectations, but fell short, I think, with the emergence of Chris Bell and the wide receiver room.
Next up is going to be a road trip to Syracuse. Syracuse will be interesting this year. I think Steve Angeli actually will do a solid job as he returns at the quarterback position. Suffered an injury last season, but he was doing really well in those first couple starts. So Syracuse might be a little bit underrated heading into next year. I think they have a chance against Louisville. Still, if Louisville really performs up to expectations, I think they'll handle business on the road before the bye week, especially. Back home against Stanford. I don't like the Stanford team. I'm pretty sure they brought in, I think it was Jaden Davis from Michigan. It was either him or Davis Warren. I can't remember which one is going to end up being their starting quarterback. Either way, I think that they will be significant underdogs to Louisville. And then Georgia Tech on the road. This is either a Friday or Saturday. This one. I could see this potentially going to Georgia Tech if it is on a Friday night. I think that definitely would play into it. I mean, the Yellow Jackets have a solid roster going to next season. The biggest thing is just that they don't have Haynes King anymore. Alberto Mendoza, the younger brother of the Heisman winner and national champion Fernando Mendoza last season, is going to be their starter. I think it'll be really interesting to see how he pans out. Certainly would be shocked if he is able to have even a similar level of success to Fernando. But I think Georgia Tech still has a shot here. And that percentage, I think, honestly, if it's a Saturday game, probably is closer to 65% for Louisville. And then if it's a Friday night, it really could go either way. So the 60's kind of in the middle of that, in my opinion.
At North Carolina the following week, and maybe the Tar Heels are in for a little bit of improvement in year two for Bill Belichick. I don't think they're going to be in that situation where they're at the top of the ACC per se, but I think they can get to a bowl game and still be a pretty decent team. They have a lot to fix though, and really at this point, I trust Louisville so much more than whatever will happen with North Carolina. It's just way too early to tell for the Tar Heels with just so much turnover from last season after it was a disaster, for lack of a better term. I think an 80% chance is pretty fair for right now, considering what we know about Louisville and really what we don't know about North Carolina. Pitt at home could be interesting. I don't remember the starting quarterback's name, but I know he was, I believe, a freshman who took over for Eli Holstein, was actually very, very solid. But they're losing a good amount of production on the defensive end, and I believe also their starting running back is gone. It was a big part of their offense, but Pitt has still managed to be very decent over the last few years, predominantly because of their defense. Like 2 years ago, they had one of the better defenses in college football, and that didn't really help them when they lost 6 games in a row. But I still think they will be a pretty tough team to compete against, even though this is at home for Louisville. Pitt's a team that I think has a lot of upset potential for a lot of the top teams in the ACC. Miami was a game that we considered for Pitt as well to get a big win against. So Louisville, I think, is kind of in that same niche or same area of ACC teams that Pitt could end up upsetting even on the road. It's going to be a 60% chance for right now, but it's very, very close here. And then on the road against Kentucky, a rivalry game that I think Louisville has been pretty dominant in over the last few years, but Kentucky has brought in a very, very good transfer portal class and has brought in a couple good transfer portal classes over the past few years and has been competitive against some of the top teams in the SEC. They've almost upset Georgia and Texas a couple times over the last couple seasons. They beat Ole Miss on the road, I think 2 years ago. It's really tough to say that Kentucky can snap this streak, but I think all the factors are looking in their favor for them to at least be favored going into this season. It's at home. It's a solid transfer portal class. Louisville has to replace so much of the team from last year, and they also collapsed a little bit towards the end of last season after that win over Miami. Like they could have been in the ACC title game picture, but lost a couple games down the stretch. I think this is the perfect year for Kentucky to get a win over their in-state rival in Louisville. It's going to be a 45%. It's almost a coin flip, just that slight favor to Kentucky since they are the home team. But overall, a very manageable season and schedule for Louisville.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Cardinals have a very, very good shot of making a run this season. We have them going 10-2 as our way too early prediction. It's very possible with this schedule, especially. There's not too many tough games on there, in my opinion. If they can get, even if they drop a game to Ole Miss or SMU at the start of the year, as long as they can split that, I think there's a great chance that they only lose one down the stretch. So overall, very, very solid prediction for the Cardinals. However, their projection is down at 8.4 wins. There's a lot of games on here that, around that 70% mark or a little bit lower where there's upset potential. It's really just going to be avoiding the upset here. Keenholz has got to take care of the football in his first season as a starting quarterback. If he can do that, there is a really solid chance that Louisville can make a run towards an ACC title. Their national championship odds are at plus 20,000, which is good for number 30 in the country. It seems pretty low. I do think that they probably should be a little bit higher than this. I really like this team heading into next season. I don't think the schedule's too difficult. For me, this feels like a team who could maybe sneak into the college football playoffs. So thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.